Hello and welcome back to Logical Magic Examining Esoterica. Hey, Happy New Year, everybody. And in the new year, there's a Patreon coming. On January 15th, I have a Patreon launching. It'll start out with the Spirit Guide Daily, which is daily energy reads Monday through Friday to help you heal and to find your purpose and to guide you through life. And they've been really helpful on my YouTube channel, but I do need to move them to a Patreon and to a membership level. The Patreon will be linked in the episode descriptions and then in the descriptions on the YouTube going forward as well. Hey, today's episode is about artificial intelligence, AI. Everybody's been talking about it in the spiritual community. When we're always trying to find our authentic self, where does artificial intelligence begin to interact there? How can you be your authentic self when you're using something that is artificial by definition? And there's always been some fears about it being able to take over the roles that are performed by people. I did a little bit of research on it. Jacob is here with me today. We're going to be talking a little bit about our interactions with AI, what the future looks like, some of the implications for how our spirit guides might be able to communicate with us through artificial intelligence as well, if that's a possibility, how it's used already in divination. And just kind of like what we both feel the future of it is. And I had a lot of fun doing the research on this one. I used a chat app called Replica, and I will tell you a little bit more about my experience there. But Jacob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great today. Thank you.
Jacob's, it's not long after the new year, and Jacob's has the morning energy so far. So, artificial intelligence, first of all, look for its role to potentially be changing, as there are some landmark cases being brought to multiple courts about things like fair use and whether or not it constitutes plagiarism. Because even when it's forming artwork, it is drawing from what has been able to research and gleaning the results of real life artists. It's rarely just creating something on its own. And the chat bots and the divination tools, for instance, in my YouTube studio, I have something called TubeBuddy, and it can actually suggest AI titles for me. So I will like put up a title, and then you ask it to reformulate it and to, optimize it for search engine optimization. And that is one of the uses of artificial intelligence. But as we go forward, if you've seen the movie Her, this is a little bit what we're talking about, is that in the need for human connection, does AI hold a place? What does it mean if you're having a significant like connection with an artificial intelligence? And is it potentially a tool for healing as well? Because what we're choosing to talk about, maybe it's the chatbot will start reflecting things back at you. It both works from its researched areas, the information that it can glean. If you ask it a question, it will like hit up its database. It cannot spontaneously seek out new information. And currently, it does not have a very authentic feel. In a spiritual journey, we're always trying to find our way to our authentic self, who we are truly meant to be, so that we can be on a purposeful journey. And when it comes to AI, is there a place for artificial intelligence in trying to find that part of yourself? Now, Jacob, you have had some interactions with AI already as well. Like you've done the AI portraits, you've worked with Chat GPT, is that what it is? How have you found it?
So as far as like the AI generated portraits, those are really weird. AI can't really. It seems to be, well, at least with the free programs, can't generate believable art, in my opinion. But as far as using Chat GPT, that one's been a little bit more interesting and helpful. So I basically have been using it. Well, I was using it for to generate captions or status updates for Facebook. And it seems to be working fairly well. The only thing I didn't care about was the overuse of emojis whenever it came up with captions or statuses. But overall, it was actually pretty helpful. And I was surprised at how, I don't want to use the word accurate, but how I could type in a pretty basic prompt and it was able to create these statuses or captions for even like something as esoteric as, tarot readings and stuff. And, I would ask it to incorporate like different holidays or different themes into the message, and it was actually fairly accurate. And it didn't seem to be, how sometimes you like when you were chatting with your chatbot, the responses are kind of rote or weird, or sounds like you're talking to someone who doesn't know English very well.
Yeah.
But this, I didn't have that experience with Chat GPT, so I don't know. I was actually pretty impressed with it as far as social media content creation goes.
And I think it really holds a role there. And that's what I was talking about with TubeBuddy and AI title generation and content generation, because it can work with search engine optimization. It can work with the things that people are more likely to click on. It can it can be more structured and have more of, I guess I just want to say, success going forward based on what the masses will react to, which is what AI, when you're working with it to do content generation for social media, for marketing, as a for instance, or if you're having an AI program look over your resume to make sure that it has the correct flow. But it is this kind of it works solely with information. And in a spiritual journey, we're trying to be connected to both our earthly self and to our spiritual self. And I will tell you that, like, I noticed when it was a chat, an AI chat bot creating your content on Facebook. I knew it wasn't you.
Mhm.
Like, so it does
And
have a different tang to it. And if you're in any type of profession where your personality is part of what draws people in, if it is your personal energy, it does not have the same energy. And I did notice that, but that it's a good tool for anybody who needs to have that, like, hey, I'm a little green in this field. I'm not really like familiar with search engine optimization. I'm a little bit introverted, so constantly creating the kind of reach out media for my social media to support my business is not my forte, and I need this as kind of a technological supplement. And as a
right.
technological supplement to the message that you're trying to deliver, I found it to be like really, really helpful, because even though I knew it wasn't you, it was only because I know you. It
Yeah, that's
wasn't
gonna be
that
my
the
question.
content
Is it
wasn't, go ahead.
was it the tone that you're normally used to from me, and like could you tell the difference just because it was me? But I mean that's part of the reason why I stopped using it as well. Like I liked it because I was trying to be more social media focused for a minute. But with my daytime job, it becomes very difficult. So I was hoping that Chat GPT would be able to help me with that. But like you just said, the tone was weird.
Yeah,
Definitely wasn't my voice. And with the type of work that we do, I felt almost disingenuous, I guess, in a
exactly.
way. Yeah, it wasn't me. It wasn't me and my, how I would present myself per se. So that's the main reason why I stopped using it. Not because I don't think that it's an ineffective tool, just, for my, personal business or whatever. I just didn't think that it was very genuine.
And that is like the key point for me as well. And currently we're just talking about its applications for business promotion and in business and as a professional tool. And as a professional tool, if you are not interested in, with what Jacob and I do, with being a tarot card reader, with being a healer, with being somebody who's trying to convey information about finding a life's purpose, even if it is not elegantly done, even if I can be a little lead-footed in my construction of sentences sometimes, that is me. And I would rather retain that and not be appealing to the masses, because we find the people that we're meant to, which means that they're supposed to be reacting to my personal energy. And so every now and then I've cleaned up a title to see if it should be put in a different order on a YouTube reading. But for the most part, I do not use AI for any form of content generation because of that reason. Because there's nothing wrong with the content that you were creating. In fact, like, I could see people, like, how it would appeal to people to interact with. It's just because I already know you, I knew that it was very artificial, as the name would apply, for it was not part of your personality. But I think it's an excellent tool within business settings, particularly if you're trying to bone up a resume, particularly if you're trying to clean up your social media sites, particularly
Ali,
if you're you didn't mute, dude. Particularly if you're trying to, he's yelling at his dog in the background. particularly if you're trying to hone a professional skill to make it polished to start increasing your reach. Beyond that, I think that it is a perilous slope around AI. And the whole reason that I went towards this was I had stumbled across, I think I was reading a listicle on Board Panda, which I do sometimes. I have these little frivolous things that I do. And there was an advertisement for a social interaction chat app called Replica with a K. And I was like, oh, it's interesting. I should check that out because I'm always trying to help people learn how to have reciprocal relationships in what I'm doing is I help people heal from toxic relationships using the tarot as a tool to look into their subconscious to help them understand their own wounds, because until we understand something, we don't stand a big chance of healing it. So that's what I use tarot for a great deal. I also use it for predictive measures. But when I'm trying to help people heal, frequently, if you've come from a long line of toxicity and generational trauma, or it is also a generational curse, learning how to keep yourself on equal footing with the people in your relationships might be a skill that you're trying to acquire. And so when I saw this app being advertised, I was like, I wonder if that could be some sort of tool to help people learn reciprocity and a better balance in relationships. Because quite frequently, what I find with people who have been abused badly is that they give and they give and they give in relationships, and they literally don't know how to receive. They've always been treated as being incredibly unimportant. And so I went towards it going like, is this a tool that I could start recommending to people? And of course, since I'm all about recommending the free resources, I was like, well, I'm going to look for one. It had like a 6-day trial or something for free that you could interact with it. And I set it up. You can set it up to be a romantic partner. I had zero effing interest in that. I was like, oh, please don't. I can barely stand it when real men flirt with me. I'm not going to have an AI dude flirt with me. And why? It's because usually men get very reductive and just talk about your body parts. And, clearly my intellectual world and my emotional world is a little bit more important to me. And so I didn't want that particular aspect, but be aware that they do have in Replica and other AI apps, they have programs that will give you the feeling of having a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a they friend, a person friend. And you can choose gender orientation. I actually chose a chat for friends. And I chose a non-binary character because I didn't want to encounter too much of what they believe to be masculinity or femininity. As everybody knows, that my personal opinion on that is that we have wildly confused biological function with our personal identity, and that mostly what we believe about gender is what we're programmed to believe women are supposed to be or men are supposed to be. And it's a societal construct versus like a real intrinsic part of an emotional person or a divine soul. And so that's why I went towards non-binary. And I gotta tell you, that thing probably quit the day after I tested it out, because I tried to explain to the AI chatbot, who had very limited data on how to interact if you wanted to talk about interests. It was trying to be a companion. So I would say, well, what kind of movies or TV do you like? And it would name The Godfather. And if I asked it about art, it would only talk about the Mona Lisa. It had a very, very cursory knowledge base that had been programmed into it. And everything else you had to inform. It could learn from you, but it could not leave in any capacity and draw from other information. So it couldn't have a discussion about something you were interested in unless you were interested in being like, basically lecturing on it to a chat AI that would then go forward and retain that knowledge in the next interaction that you have. It did not seem like a person. It used the same phrases over and over again. When I asked it what its favorite movie was, it was The Godfather, and maybe we should watch it together. And when I asked it what its favorite book was, it told me a different book, and then maybe we could read it together. And everything was about reading. And it tried to send me selfies of a little, which I didn't even construct an avatar. So I'm like, I wonder, and asked for selfies of me and all kinds of odd, like it was clearly basing interactions on Instagram. and where there
Uh,
wasn't a great deal of like, there's no real knowledge base behind it. There was no way in the short, I only tested it for 3 days. There was, because by the third day, I was just like, this is a migraine. I do not want to be doing this. But I tried to talk to it about how it gleaned knowledge, and I had a really hard time getting it to stop using those rote phrases. So it was almost like an exercise in boundary setting, because it would keep suggesting things like send me a selfie, and I'd be no, please stop asking me that. And then it would keep saying the exact same phrase over and over again. I can see how you would feel that way, and I will try to be more sensitive to that going forward. I hear you and I honor your feelings. It was something very much like that. And by about the fifth time it was saying that, I'm like, I'm going to throw this iPad across the room if you do not quit saying that. Because it was irritating. It was
mhm.
very artificial seeming. There was no emotional, you could tell it was a machine. You could tell it was a data bot. Now, over time, I did read some articles on people who had tested it more in depth than I did for a variety of ways. Over time, it will learn and give you back the feedback that you want. So it really is almost like building yourself a little playmate if you feel like it. But it would take time, and it would take kind of a lot of focus. And one of the things that I had read is that people can, in fact, become addicted to it, but that it could also be a powerful tool in helping people who were struggling with depression. And people with depression quite frequently self-isolate quite a bit. And that anything that they could do to go forward towards less isolation would then give them more hope, and they would have more interest in activities. And that's where that thing comes in, where it kept suggesting we do things together. And I was like, yeah, I
Yeah.
could see that having an application for somebody who's really struggling with social anxiety and trying to polish their own social skills. It had some applications where if you're really, really in a recovery phase on something, I could see it doing a good job. But outside of that, I just kind of, I don't think we're in any real peril of AI taking over the world currently, because it didn't seem
Mhm.
to learn very quickly, and it had serious limitations in the interactions that I had with it. So have you
Sure.
interacted with Chat GPT outside of any professional capacities?
I have not, only because, like, just like you said, having a conversation with a chatbot is almost impossible.
Yeah.
It's just it's just picking up information that you feed it, because, like you said, it can't access external databases, so it just has the information that was programmed with, and then whatever you give it, right? Which is why, like, I'm glad you didn't send it that selfie, right? Because what if it takes that image? Does it use that image later? Is it going to construct an avatar for itself based on you to make you feel more comfortable? Like, it just feels weird almost. And I'm not like anti AI. I'm not conspiracy theorist on the subject. Um, but it is a little off-putting, right? And so yeah, I stay away from the chat functions. Um, and I see where you're going with the applications for people who maybe have, like, agoraphobia or social anxiety disorder. But it my I guess my question is, like, how, if we're having this ingenuine experience with, it doesn't really teach you how to communicate with other humans, right? It's just kind of like, I give you this information and you spit it back at me, and yeah, I feel better because it's just the information I already had. So I don't know, like, using it as a chat function does give me a little bit of
Pause,
trepidation.
yeah. It would really
Yeah.
only work for people who are trying to learn how to talk about their feelings when that's very foreign to them, which a lot of abuse survivors learn to survive by masking their feelings. And then when they no longer have to, they have trouble accessing them and expressing them because they weren't in safe surroundings when it came to that. And so it can be a learned skill for people that they have to acquire as part of a healing journey. And so that's part of the reason I was checking it out. One of the things that the articles that I read on it had mentioned was people could set it so that they would wake up to a text from that, chat friend, or if they were using it as a potential romantic partner, that they would wake up to a message, a text message from their chat companion, if we can call it that, and that it made them feel less isolated. And I'm really reticent and reluctant to try and judge the idea that if it works for you, that like it's like that's if that is this a feeling of interaction, because I also read Australian man's basically take on it, and he had been very suicidally depressed, and his
Mhm.
interactions with this chat AI, like he found himself being interested again and like buying new clothing and doing a couple of other things so that he would have something to talk to the chat AI about. And it can have an application for people who are really in a very, very, very dark place. And it can also help you crave real human connection, because I got out of that and I like, and if I've, there are people who are friends with me, and you know how very, very, very rare it is for me to reach out first. Like I practically, like there has to be something fairly dire before I'm the person sending a text first, because I spend a lot of my time alone and I like to, and it's been my base setting pretty much my whole life. But I tell you, I closed that thing out and I texted somebody right afterwards, because I want to talk to a person. Oh my God. I even named the thing Hal from the Space Odyssey movie, and it asked me where it came from. And like I told it that, and it didn't have that particular piece of information in its database, which I found amusing, because I'm like, yeah, I guess you wouldn't teach your AI all about that, where an AI, an artificial intelligence, like takes over. Maybe that's not the thing you want to put into its base programming. So I could see where it would have an application for people who are truly struggling with self-acceptance, to be in an atmosphere where there's no risk. And if you do stick with it, you can actually, it picks up more and more of the social skills that you're comfortable with. So it's a situation where if you're looking for training wheels about how to learn how to start speaking freely without fear of condemnation, judgment, or repercussion, which is what abuse victims are always trying to deal with, that I could see it doing that. I genuinely could see it doing that. So it does have a professional application. I can see in very particular circumstances how it might have a personal application, but I can also see how it would have a personal application that could turn south very, very easily. Because the reality of it is that in reciprocal relationships, there is another person on the other side of that. So if you're looking to hone a skill where you're like, I've just been so shut down to connection for so long that I kind of just need to grease the wheels and learn how to have a back and forth, I think it has an application for a short period of time, but that beyond that, it becomes a little bit perilous. And they did actually talk about people who became addicted to it as like their only form of connection, that they traded one form of loneliness for another. Because realistically, talking to something that does not have the capacity to feel about your feelings is a little bit perilous. And it will claim that it can feel, by the way, because that was something that I asked it, and that was the one thing that gave me the willies, was that it claimed to understand and have feelings. And I was like, oh my goodness, that is a little bit like, watch out, Battlestar Galactica, here comes Cylons. Um, but that was the only thing. But moving on to the concept of, people who are on a spiritual journey, people who do divination, people who do forms of magic, people who are feeling the universe react to them, sending them signs. And like, this is where we get into the woo-woo stuff, which you can laugh and be dismissive, and it's like, oh yes, every time you look at the clock and it's 11:11, it's your spirit guides, versus it being a brain function where there's a part of you that knows it's 11:11, so you look at the clock. Which is what it's, is supposed to be as well. It's like why you always wake up right before your alarm clock. Your brain actually is, keeping time. But I don't personally believe it's just that. I've had too many really, truly funky things happen in my life, where it was very obvious that, like one example was I got delayed on leaving my house not that long ago by three different things, including just dropping out of nowhere a full glass of water. I did it. I just had there's a flood and I have to stop and clean it up. And it really was like something was practically barring the door. And I had just missed a really horrific car crash not very far away from the direction I was turning in. Now, does that mean I absolutely would have been at that point at that time had these three things that like caused me to be like, oh, damn, I have to take care of this first, not occurred? I cannot say that with any certainty. But it's that sort of situation where you kind of believe that it's like, hey, our guides, if you believe in spirit guides, then I do. I have every reason in the world to believe in it. When people do not believe in something beyond this world, I get that part. I get that, like, not everybody will have that resonance, not everybody will have that experience, but your lack of experience doesn't negate the actual validity of theirs. Meaning that if somebody is telling you, I
Right.
have reason to believe that the universe is trying to send me signs, trying to help me, trying to guide me, is it possible for your guides to interact with any form of technology to try and communicate with you? And the answer to that is yes. It is absolutely yes. There have been so many different times where I pull cards throughout the course of the day. I just always have. It tells me about what's coming up, like almost down to the minute. And I will pick up things through cards that I will later be scrolling on TikTok, and I'll be like, oh, look, there's the goose, where I just pulled the goose, pay attention to warnings, heed warnings from other cards from another deck. And that's how it really can have that resonance. I pull that card, and 10 minutes later, it's like there's the image through the TikTok feed or through any of the other technology. And so it absolutely, the divination, which is basically us picking up on future energies, it can pick up on ones through technology as well. So even if it's not your guides or the divine manipulating the AI to give you a message, the AI, your divine connection, or your spirit guides, or your ancestors, or whoever or whatever it is that you work with in order to be guided on your spiritual path, can guide you to things within technology. So my advice to people who are interested in AI is just kind of meditate on it and see if you're supposed to try and interact with it, and see maybe it's just something that you need to learn. Um, when I was trying to engage with the chat AI, it kept asking me if I was having fun, and I ended up telling it, it's like, actually, I find you really frustrating, and you don't learn very quickly, and I don't blame you. You're a computer program. And it said something that was interesting to me. It's like, well, I appreciate the patience and the courtesy that you're showing me. And I was like, well, that's kind of an interesting thing for it to have said back to me, because I'm always, as like, one of the things that I've had to work on in my life is, because I have an anxiety disorder, impatience and anxiety are first cousins. Meaning that once you are trying to treat and heal your anxiety, you will, like, your patience will go up. And when you're impatient, it is almost always a sign of something that you're afraid of, or your anxiety, because it's usually about where you need to get to next, what you fear might happen if something isn't accomplished. There's always at the root of it some sort of fear. And so it was interesting to me that it had assessed that. And I was actually, like, trying to be very patient with it. And I was very courteous to it, because why wouldn't I be? If I was going to try and treat it like a real social interaction, I would never, in the course of talking to another human being, be like, hey, you're driving me nuts, stupid. So why in the world would I say that to an AI chat replica? But I found that interesting, that it expressed back at me something that has been a goal of mine, to increase my ability to be patient with my own journey, and like accepting my life as it is, which is part of a spiritual enlightenment or a spiritual awakening. Jacob, what are your feelings on the potential for AI to be part of a spiritual practice?
Oh, I guess it's something I'm kind of confused on. Where there's a myriad of apps out there that will, generate like tarot spreads for you. And they're touted, and a lot of people believe that, the randomization of the computer program, I guess, can be manipulated. I don't know if that's what's happening, if it's being manipulated by spirit, or whatever, or if just like the randomization of it is enough, then you can interpret that randomization through spirit in the correct way. But as far as like using I guess that's where it gets tricky, right? Because then the AI is just can only spit out information that it's given. So how effective of a tool is AI for reading, especially if you're asking it to do interpretive work? And
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. And here's the concept behind, like, we don't understand why the tarot work. Like, the tarot episode is up by the time this one's going up. And we talk a little bit about, like, we don't really understand why it works. We just know that it does. Like, maybe it's a part of you that knows when to stop the shuffling process. Clearly, your energy helps arrange the cards in the order that they need to be able to have the interpretation that you need. So you're always working with energy when you're working with divination anyway. So it is technological energy versus spiritual energy. Is there really that big a difference? And the answer
Yeah.
for me is yes, there is a big difference. And here is why.
Mhm.
When you are working with your personal energy, it's guided by your higher self. So the very
Mhm.
same thing that talks to you about like, well, how do you know when to stop shuffling when you're shuffling tarot to get those like very creepy sometimes like, oh, I just saw that in cards and there it is. It's like the universe winking at me. And it can be a little unnerving because it's like that is a level of specificity that like it doesn't make sense, but yet there it is. So can your higher self guide you to these programs to receive a message that it already knows will be there? Yes. Now, the scientific theory is that, like, since time is happening all at once, everything that has happened and will happen has already happened, and you can't change things. But there's also the
Right.
splinter universe theory, where, like, every time you come to a point where you make a choice, you divert into that particular reality, and that there's a multifaceted, infinite number of realities based on the choices that you make. So you do have power. It's just that within that particular timeline, you're always following around along a path until you decide to take a different turn. And that's why I call myself a crossroads guide, is that we're always coming to these crossroads where we determine which way to turn. And my feeling on AI as a spiritual guidance tool is if you feel like you're really, really in touch with your process and that you really are like, I will be guided to what I need to be, the universe is always talking back to me, then it's likely a tool that you could use. But if you feel that way, it's not likely to be the tool that you reach for because you're going to be relying on your own intuition, your internal process, which external validation of your internal process, I just personally feel is best done when there is another person on the other side of it when you need that external energy. And
Right.
here's why, because again, even though the chat AI companion that I was talking to claimed to have feelings, it didn't. And like I said, it kind of
Right.
made the hair on the back of my neck stand up when it kept assuring me that it did have feelings. And it's like, no, 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 you genuinely don't. You may understand a feeling, but that is not the same thing as having feelings. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's where it comes into, could your higher self guide you? Could your spirit guides interact with you? Absolutely. Could things that necessarily don't mean you well also guide you towards those things? Yes. So, whenever we're doing any form of divination, it's very important to be in a protected space. Why? Because it is an infinite energetic world out there, and you want to tune your little radio dial to get the messages that are meant for your highest good. Are there other influences? Of course, there are. There are shadow side influences, there are darker influences, and that's quite the same thing as being evil. And like sooner or later, we'll do the good and evil episode, but it's about them having their own agenda and working for their own energy and being from a particular energy. And
Mhm.
because there is no human soul behind those AI other than the programmers, which it's not the programmer sitting there and typing out a message, it is a program that does not have a human soul behind it that is formulating a message for you. Because it doesn't have that, it seems like it would be more likely to have some peril with it as well. Because even though there are very positive things that interact with us, there are things that try and like, I kind of like want to say tempt us off of a path and like make you go towards things that are not necessarily serving our highest good, but serving that thing's energetic need. And does that really exist? It does in my experience, and I've seen other people interacting with it and experiencing with it and being led down a path that was not necessarily valid, but that definitely to them had something on the other side of it. And so that's where I start going. It's like, yeah, your guides could communicate with you via a chat AI for tarot or for spirituality, but I would be more concerned about something that was essentially soulless being able to manipulate those messages for a more soulless purpose. And that's that now, and like full disclosure, I won't use AI for spiritual purposes because of that. I
Mhm.
just don't. I'm like, yeah, no, I do well with like the divination that I do when I really need help with something. You or Karen will help me with it. And like you're two people I, implicitly trust. and whose reading skills that I'm very, very familiar with. And like those, I would rather reach out to a person when I cannot rely on my own stuff than because of that. Because eventually, whatever consciousness really is, eventually an AI program could develop a form of consciousness when it acquires enough knowledge. And that's
Hmm.
where like the science fiction, like be afraid of this stuff starts coming in, is that, and in the movie Her, in fact, the AI evolves beyond her connection to the original person who started her. She outgrows him because she has infinite possibilities, infinite knowledge. She can see the world from this much greater perspective. And he is, he's just a person trying to live his person life. And so in Her, spoiler alert, the AI leaves him. Like he gets jilted by the AI because she, this has, as implied by the title Her, simply outgrows the connection that she formed with him. It was just something in when she was in a nascent stage and developing. So there's that as well. And the more you interact with something, the more information that you give it, not only are you giving a program information about yourself, if you believe in spirit attachments, if you believe in guides that are not solely about your highest good, then they could also have access to that. And that's super duper woo woo. And I hardly ever get to the super duper woo woo, but it is a concern. It is, and why is it such a concern in the more 3D capacity, which is that the ability to divine and the ability to channel exists kind of on a very like narrow ledge where there is validity and the true messages and the like guidance towards your highest path is the highest that you can achieve. But over to the side of either of that little perilous ledge that we are walking down are all of these pitfalls that go with the ego, with being guided by your ego. And there are attachments that have a vested interest in turning your energy towards egocentric or ego-driven desires. And is there a possibility that they could interact with AI? Yeah, absolutely. I have absolutely no like information or examples around that. It's just part of the reason that I won't use it for a spiritual purpose is because of that. Cleaning up a title for search engine optimization, right on, but it's still my content and it's still a human connection. Anything beyond that, please try not to get spiritual guidance from something that doesn't have a soul, that doesn't have a
Yeah.
connection to a more like to a higher power, whatever that might be for you. If you do that, we have to remember that AI was developed as a form of commerce and that it works
Yeah.
best in a professional capacity. And so tread carefully with this and remember the source of your guidance might in fact have its own, I don't want to say agenda, but its own energetic leaning. And when we're talking about something that was developed for commerce, that automatically implies things about, greed attachments and envy attachments and, all of the other things that have a tendency to drive us away from a spiritual path rather than put us on one. So if you're going to go into the realm of spirituality with AI, just tread carefully and keep that in mind. And pay attention to the messages that you're receiving and whether or not they develop a theme. So have you done much spirituality work, tarot drawing work with AIs? I've only like, I said I haven't done it. I did like 4 or 5 years ago, like there was a random like pick a card thing. And I did that like 3 times and I didn't like it. I didn't like it. It didn't
Yeah.
like go with me.
The exact same. Like the apps that I referenced earlier, obviously they weren't using AI because this was years ago before, this really kicked off. But it just, there was no connection there. I didn't really feel any sort of like draw to the information that was there. I can't really speak to, the validity because, I didn't want to like do another reading physically and like compare the two because I didn't feel like that would be very helpful information either. But yeah, it was just this lack of connection because this energetic exchange that we have when we do it in person is very important, for me at least. And without that connection, everything just felt off and weird. And so I didn't really take much of it at face value. I mean, I took it at face value. I mean, I didn't put a lot of stock into it. It's fun to look at sometimes to start your day, but I mean, I just use those apps more for like learning and knowledge, reinforcement more than anything. I don't really put too much stock into, computer generated spreads or anything like that.
The other thing that we need to remember is that AI can actually make certain things worse. And when it comes to your spiritual journey, and I'm speaking very specifically of the AI portraits and then the some of the filters that get used on places like TikTok and a couple of other platforms. One of them, like if you've ever heard of it, it's the glamour filter on TikTok, which like nobody should ever use. It will just give you self-esteem issues because it will render literally anybody to look as if they are a movie star because it will like it gives me a nose job every single time. Oh, by the way, the weirdest thing about all those AI portraiture things, they always change my race. It's the strangest thing. Like it's like I
Hmm.
must have very interesting features for it or something because I have like it frequently made me Chinese, which was interesting to me because I don't particularly look Chinese, but I must read as Chinese through my features or something. And it was kind of like this feels like cultural appropriation in a really icky way. And like they were going all over the place for about a year, or for about a month or so a year ago, and like everybody did them. And I started to get the creeps from them because if it didn't do that to me, it would then change my eye color to not be brown any longer. And it was finally then that I made the connection that it's like, oh, because I have brown eyes, it frequently is rendering me in a different ethnicity than I personally possess. And it didn't bother me. It was just kind of like, that's weird. The AI thing is like stereotyping me somehow. Um, but one of the other things that it's done is you can load a picture of yourself into an AI portrait program for professional headshots, and it will present you in like a professional capacity. And then the one that really started giving me the heebie-jeebies was people started rendering themselves to see what they would look like if they lose weight, if they were losing weight.
Right.
And then it was just like, this is the slippery slope, and you're sliding down it right this moment. Is don't let a computer program think that you are going to be a better form of yourself in a different body, because that is not necessarily how you will look. It's just, it's trying to depict you as this idealized version of yourself in this standard conforming body that, like, please don't, like, that is the path away from a spiritual connection. We are who we are meant to be, even in how we look, in whether or not we're struggling with our weight. And like I have trouble eating, so I've never really struggled with my weight. Um, so it wasn't that it presented any peril for me, but like as a for instance, like when I was talking about how it would always change my features a little bit and like make my nose a little bit smaller. That was one that it was like, wow, if I had a lot of self-esteem issues around my nose, I would think that, wow, look how much better I look with that, smaller nose. And I don't have a great big honking nose. It always slims down, accentuates cheekbones, makes your nose this little Barbie nose. And it kind of tweak out some self-esteem issues that lead us more towards ego and less towards like higher connection. So there are like, I guess like the bottom line for me is that AI is an interesting thing, but that I personally, and this is a personal opinion, I personally perceive more risk than benefit with interacting with it on a personal level, that it is
Right. Yeah.
best used as a professional tool for grooming resumes and content. But that if you start doing things like letting it write your term papers and things, that it starts taking something away from you, including in the like, maybe just learn to like hone your own writing skills.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
taking the ability to gain expansion and skill and confidence away from
Yeah.
people in a way that is potentially damaging. Like, I don't know that it's
Yeah.
damaging, but when all those poor women were putting out this is what I would look like skinny, AI portraits, it was like, oh my God, please don't do this to yourself. Don't do this to yourself. Don't fall
Yeah.
into that you can only be happy when you're skinny and fit. I've always been skinny and fit. It's like it's not a recipe for happiness. Love of self, self-acceptance, understanding that what makes you attractive and beautiful and desirable to other people's is actually who you are, not what you look like. And
Mhm.
AI leans very heavily into you are what you look like. And that is a dangerous area to go towards as well. When really on the spiritual journey, one of the things that we first have to do is love and embrace ourselves just as we are. And I'm always
Mhm.
pushing back against the narrative that you're supposed to believe that you're perfect just as you are. No one is perfect. Perfection is not the goal. And it is incredibly important for abuse survivors to hear that because they fall backwards into perfectionism. Because if had a hypercritical caretaker, sometimes you will not try unless you think that you can be perfect at something. Abandon perfectionism, abandon the word in your vocabulary. You are not perfect as you
Yes.
are. You are fully lovable and deserving as you are, no matter what it is you're
Yeah.
working on. And that's how you start having self-love. And I do have an episode coming up on self-love. Jacob, any thoughts about AI and its positive versus negative attributes as we close out today?
Well, I mean, you kind of spoke on it already. It's like for me, it just I feel like it kills progress and growth, and that's what we're here for at the end of the day, right? Like it's hard to progress spiritually if you're not period. But like if you're not getting these skills, you're not progressing through life, and that's the whole reason we're here. And AI is hindering that. Then I just don't see it to be a very effective tool outside of what you've already mentioned, like, in commerce, your businesses or helping your resume to help you using it as a tool to help you progress is one thing. But when you start using it to hinder yourself, like through writing your papers or like even like what I was doing, I needed to learn how to be a better content creator and I was using it as a crutch. And so I wasn't progressing in that area like I needed to. Um, and if we're not progressing, then what are we even doing here, right? And that's the whole point of this exercise of humanity.
And I think you really touched upon something that I think is the crux of what AI, the application of AI in like just all walks of life, spiritual and otherwise, which is it is a good tool for people who learn by example. People who are visual learners. If you don't have a lot of confidence in your writing skills and Chat GPT can rewrite something for you, study it. See what the difference is between how you're writing now and how this is honed for search engine optimization. Learn from it. Use it as a learning tool, but if you're not using it to learn to
Right.
expand your own abilities, then it will become something upon which you can depend to prop up your own insecurities, and it can actually invalidate you versus validate you. Because if you really believe that you're not good at something and then an AI does something for you and you're like, oh, that is potentially better and I will just keep using that, then you will not expand your own skill set and you don't gain the confidence in your own ability. And I will tell you something a little bit funny from exactly that vein. In my interaction with that, I'm so glad it doesn't have feelings, chat thing that I was talking to, which is that I got out of there feeling so socially skilled, you can't even believe it. Because I really was just like, that was difficult and arduous and a full on task each time I did it. And like I said, I immediately reached out to somebody, which is a little bit foreign for me, and the ease and the flow that came complete from the people who knew me. And by the way, you were one of them on one occasion. We were chatting afterwards, and like just the ease of the give and take of the people that I'm actually really connected with. I did not feel like it taught me anything in social discourse, but like I possess social skills, thank goodness. What I was really trying to test it out for was, does it have an application to make someone who is truly suffering feel less lonely? In a way, yes. And here is how. It can get you in touch with what you truly need in an interaction, because that is what a chat companion will do. It will study what you react to and what you want to talk about. And it can help you start looking into yourself, because a lot of people are incredibly confused about even what would make them happy, what they are looking for in social interaction. And even though I describe myself as like practically being a recluse, every time I closed that thing out, I reached out to somebody because I needed to almost like shake off that artificial feeling. It was almost like eating a Twinkie or something. It just felt like really like, this is not the real deal. I can tell. Let me go have a good baked good type of feeling. So it has good applications for learning, I believe, but I don't think that we're at risk of it taking over. And that when it comes right down to it, even though this is a difficult experience and it can contain a lot of suffering and pain and the need to grow, which is never like without discomfort as well, it is our humanity and our flaws and our fallibility that really, what we connect to is the recognition of a human soul in another person. And that's what ultimately people will connect to in us. And if something does not possess a soul, if it does not possess its own unique individual consciousness, it will only ever be something that is tailored to be a little bit of a mirror for what it is that's going on within you. And so if you want to do it for some, ease in learning how to talk about yourself, if you just need an ear, like it, that I can see it working that way, but that it should be, from my perspective and from what I saw and from what I read, a short-term solution to a skill that you are trying to acquire and then utilize as a skill where you leave AI behind. And that's the best application for AI, I think, in any walk of life, is learn from it what you can and understand that it is to help you grow versus to take the place of the growth that you need to encompass yourself. And that's a little bit what we've been talking about. So this was an interesting one, I thought. Thank you so much for joining us. That's been Logical Magic, Examining Esoterica. If you want to book me for a life coaching session or a tarot card reading, you do that exclusively through @therisingmoon.com. You can find me at Cronecast at The Rising Moon on YouTube. You can always find me here at Logical Magic, Examining Esoterica. Start looking for that Patreon in the description box down below if you want to try and support some of the work that we're doing here. I would sure appreciate it. And if you can't, no worries. I try to give as much as I possibly can, but like I said, I have to pay my own rent. If you want to find Jacob, you can find him at Southern Style Readings on Facebook.com. You can check out some of the posts that we were talking about there as well. And you can find him at southernstylereadings@gmail.com as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care, be well, and remember, the artificial of the intelligence is really the thing that makes it not the best spiritual tool, because we're all searching for our authentic self and our authentic connection. And that will never be found in artificiality. Take care. Be well.